You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. We are back today continuing our reading of Nation Building. It's been a very insightful work so far. Just to remind you, we left off on the itinerary of themes that a African Centered curriculum should include or should employ. Before we get into tonight's reading, let me remind you that this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. There are other shows on the network that I and their hosts are inviting you to check out as well.
This is W.E.B with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the ProBlack Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the Revolutionary Matron, on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Make sure to check out all those shows. We just saw the Harsh Reality Podcast dropped an ep last night, as well as The Learning Curve with the Revolutionary Matron. Her and Rock Soldier were together having a deep conversation. I suggest you guys tune in and you can hear about, part of this brother, Rock Soldier's life story. And it's something that all guys should definitely listen to, but women should listen to as well. Make sure you guys tune in and check out that episode. If you've been paying attention, the ProBlack Perspective just wrapped up that mini-series that they were doing on the open secret to white domination. Only thing I say from the ProBlack Perspective is on the continent right now, so I don't know what's next, but I'm sure it'll be a good one. So make sure to tune in to that mini-series, as well as make sure to keep up to date as to what's coming up next on his show. Okay. With that said, make sure you guys like this video. If you're here listening, you hear my voice, like this video. You should have subscribed already, but if you somehow haven't, make sure you subscribe. Click the bell to be notified when I have new content up. Right, and while you're here too, check out the community page. There's some recent posts I put up. I'm going to be putting up more posts on the community tab as well. So when you go to the main YouTube page for the Bitter Medicine Podcast, there's different tabs, videos, playlists, I think, and community. Check out the new community tab. I got some photos from Derico Cooper Photography this past weekend that he took of a Tuskegee Airmen memorial. Great photos. I have a bunch of them, so I'll be putting them out in increments of 5 over the next few weeks. You guys make sure to go and support it. Check it out. Give it a thumbs up. Drop some comments. Let the photographer, Derico Cooper, know that you appreciate his work. You appreciate the imagery. All right. So we're going to pick up where we left off. Like I said, we were in the midst of this part of the book towards a African Centered curriculum, and we were talking about this itinerary of themes. And we were making our way through, and we stopped last time on the theme of we stopped last time on the theme of co-equality of men and women, equal responsibility and participation. And the fundamental assumptions are on the basis of sexual equality and the heightened preeminence enjoyed by the African woman, we may infer that the African man and woman, by mutual agreement, organize the extended family on a matrilineal basis. When both the black male and the black female take up the struggle for justice against white supremacy, they are endowed with the strongest possible insurance that they will remain unified. They are united in a common effort against injustice, and simultaneously they express the strongest possible statement about respect and love for themselves as individuals. In doing this, the black male and black female are declaring that they have conferred upon themselves the highest possible value, which is essential if there is to be self and group defense. And this is what the folks on social media like Twitter, where there's a Twitter war almost every other day between black men and black women, this is what folks got to understand. Because our Eurasian counterparts, they understand it. You know, I was having a conversation with someone recently about miscegenation. And their take is a kind of a typical Christian, black Christian take of you love who loves you and you love them back. And while that's cool in a different world, right, in some sci-fi story, that's not cool during war. And I say war as often as I can because I want folks to understand that's exactly what it is. The things that we're seeing, the things that we're going through, our frustrations are all based on war, and more specifically based on losing battles along the way. And for losing battles for some time now. Someone said recently that in the grand scheme of things, if a day is 24 hours, we've only been in this predicament for 5 minutes, and I get that. I get that in the grand scheme of things. The thing is, though, we're not in the glory days, and we want to be in the glory days. In fact, there's no badge of honor in not being in your glory days anymore and trying to get back to those days. The honor is in maintaining your glory days. The honor is in maintaining your nation, your power, your ability to not be dominated at all. You know, to be dominated even for a year in real time. It's still being dominated for a year. Although in the grand scheme of things, it's like a minute. You feel me? Or a second. The aim of this theme is to develop a sensitivity and commitment to eliminate any behaviors typical of sexism or sexual exploitation. The next item is democratic plurality of racial or ethnic nationalities in the American political economy. The fundamental assumption here is the problem of the American nation state is that the peoples of the subordinated Indian, New African, and Puerto Rican nations have been denied the right to self-determination. Every other ethnic group in America, a nation of nations, has accepted the fact of its separateness and used it to its own social advantage. The American Constitution does not reflect the fact that the United States is a nation of nations, an aggregation of ethnic and religious groups having or seeking power. That doesn't even make sense, but okay. The very logic of self-defense necessitates the group consolidation of the African American for the very purpose. But ethnic group unification for self-defense must also carry with it the logical commitment to economic, political, and cultural unification, which is the very opposite of individual tendencies. Tendencies towards integration and assimilation, The country is not homogeneous. A fateful triangular tension among national groups is coming to the fore. This triangle comprising Anglo-Saxon nationalism, Black nationalism, and Jewish nationalism, also known as Zionism. The aim of this theme is to foster profound awareness of the psychic and constitutional entrenchment of white racial ethnic supremacy in the U.S. and to develop a commitment to advance the African nationality within the nation of nations that the American political economy, in fact, is. The next theme is human and civil rights. Fundamental assumption is that we shall never use our physical prowess to oppress the human race, but we will use our strength physically, morally, and otherwise to preserve humanity and civilization. Number 2, the Afrocentric method seeks to transform human reality by ushering in a human openness to cultural pluralism, which cannot exist without the unlocking of the minds for acceptance of an expansion of consciousness. The aim of human and civil rights is to foster an awareness of one of the higher goals of social activism, creation of a world order that is culturally pluralistic and truly democratic, equalitarian, and just. The next itinerary is impediments, actually. Impediments, the fundamental assumption for impediments is the necessary re-education of blacks and a possible solution of racial crisis can begin. Strangely enough, only when blacks fully realize the central fact in their lives, the white man is their bitter enemy. Now we talking. The white man is their bitter enemy. But this is not the ranting of wild-eyed militancy, but the calm and unmistakable verdict of several thousand years of documented history. Now we talking. And if that's and that is an impediment. Because again, talking to my friend the other day about this miscegenation stuff, it's hard for folks to see that, yo, these folks are your enemy. You're talking about marrying and loving your enemy. And like I told them, to echo the sentiment of Umar Johnson, love is about what you prioritize. If you prioritize your blackness, your Africanness, if you prioritize Afrocentricity, then anything that follows that you love will follow that original theme: Afrocentricity, African centeredness, race first, right? So then you cannot go and marry outside of your race. Like I told this friend of mine, it's like, real talk, I get that there's some difficulty in I'm just gonna be real about it. I get that there's difficulty dealing with a lot of black women. And that's not to say, that's not to say it's only black women. I'm sure it's probably women in general. But I only could really tell you about dealing with black women on a deep basis. And it can be difficult. And this is why also you need an African-centered education. You need an education that takes away, that takes away the nonsense and teaches our young men and women, boys and girls, how to interact with one another. To see the long term. To see the long term. Don't look at me now when I'm trying to make my way in the world and judge me or misjudge me because of it. Like, see the potential. And this goes for our men, this goes for our women, males and females. See the potential and deal with the potential. And if I don't meet my potential, then you could deal with me different. You know what I mean? But we got to re-educate, re-Africanize these folks to understand these things. And it starts with, really and truly, it starts with understanding why it is you have to be race first. You got to be race first. You got to be African-centered, because your bitter enemy is this white boy who won't let up. they've made up their mind and determined themselves, they just won't let up. And so you got to have that in you. And if you want any of these things that have been talked about on this itinerary of items, this is your biggest ace in the hole, so to speak. And this is also your biggest impediment. This, to me, could have been one of the first items that they talked about, right? Because the first thing you got to do is understand you have a mortal enemy. And it's not some boogeyman. It's a real person you could see, and you could see it in their actions. You could see it for several thousand years of documented history, as they say here. To continue, number 2, recently there has been an unraveling and an analysis of the core issue of the first global power system of mass oppression, the power system of racism, white supremacy. Once the collective victim understands this fundamental issue, the ultimate organizing of all the appropriate behaviors necessary to neutralize the great injustice of the white supremacy power system will be only a matter of time. The length of time required to neutralize global white supremacy will be inversely proportional to 1, the level of understanding of the phenomenon, plus 2, the evolution of self and group respect, the will, determination, and discipline to practice the appropriate counter-racist behaviors. Number 3, the greatest reason used against the Negro is the greatest weapon used against the Negro is disorganization. 4, if you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated the race of life. With confidence you have won even before you have started. That's Garvey right there. 5, with our goodness, our built-in hope, our beautiful humanity, our belief in justice for all people, we fall into their traps. Because we have not learned to practice, figuratively speaking, the essential selfishness of survival. We should give no piece of the pie until every member of our family has a piece of the pie. We want to help every cause, every people. And I get it, right? Although sometimes I do believe this notion of a beautiful humanity is a little bit overexpressed. I actually think a lot of this stuff is just fair. It's fair and hoping that, well, if I help y'all out, y'all will help me out. And that's just not how it works. Be selfish. Feed your people first. Take care of them first. And that goes out to you LGBTQIA plus people. Be about your race first. Let's get that. Let's get that fixed. Let's get that problem fixed, and then you could go about and do whatever it is you want to do in your bedroom. Not that you can't do it now, as a matter of fact. But be about your people. When we begin to lose these nation lessons, we begin to move deeper and deeper into a trap of dependency. In the year since our forced exile from Africa, we have been on the crisis. We have been in one crisis after another over leadership. We stand at the crossroads of history, engaged in a sad debate over direction and definition in political leadership. The one thing oppression does to a people is to kill in them the mind and the will to assume responsibility. When you get on the edge of power, you experience a critical moment of self-discovery. And that is the tragic separation from having lost power. And this is part of what our conflict is about. Number 7, if African people, the world over, are to save themselves, they must find a way to reclaim some of the life-sustaining things they lost in slavery, colonialism, and through the massive anti-African propaganda dispensed by Europeans all over the world. It is basic that African people and all people regain their self-confidence and the image of God as they originally conceived him or her to be. In the conquest of most of the non-European world, Europeans' greatest achievement was the conquest of the mind, right? That mental slavery. None but ourselves, right? Only us could change it, right? This is why the constant back and forth these days about religion, on one hand, it's super important, but on the other hand, it's a super impediment. Negroes are jumping through every hoop to hold on to this religion thing. Every hoop. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, a couple months now, I guess. There was a guy in the chat. I can't remember if it was for Shoot the Breeze or what it was, but he was Urzuliism and him were going back and forth for a minute, and I guess that put a bit of taste in that brother's mouth, and he never returned. But he was talking about the New Testament is bogus, it's the Old Testament that you want to use, and blah blah blah. But really and truly, we got to get off of that stuff. We have our own African spirituality. Let's just get back to it. But this mental grasp that our enemy has on us with their colonizer religions, most folks can't give up on that stuff. And it's the crazy thing about it, and I've talked about this before, is that you're supposed to reach an age of reason where you question that stuff. I know I did. I know several others around me who have. You question that stuff and realize that shit is fairy tale stuff. It doesn't even make sense. Now, maybe unfortunately, when a lot of people reach the age of reason, perhaps, they don't have the alternatives or the insights to seek out the alternatives or what have you around them. You know. But yeah, these are our impediments. Number 8, whether we wish to acknowledge the fact or not, there are 3 homogenous forces engaged in a new scramble for Africa right now. A whole century after the infamous Berlin Conference, there is the West, which we all know about, and which most anti-colonialists focus exclusively upon. There is the Soviet bloc. Remember, this book was written in the 90s. Then there is the Arab world, which, using oil, money, and Islam, has revived its ancient mission to take over and Arabize Africa. Arabization means the abandonment of African names, clothes, languages, customs, religions, architecture, social organization, political norms, etc., and substitution of Arab ones, usually under the guise that they are Islamic, not Arabic. And that's the thing. And sure, we've had some folks who did wonderful things with Arab names, Africans with Arab names who did some wonderful things. But that doesn't mean that it has anything to do with the religion. Look at the man or the woman first. Look at the man or the woman first. Number 9, objections, even violent objection to any organization exclusively for the black race can be expected from those Africans who are victims of the various pseudo-universalist doctrines which make white hegemony acceptable to its victims. For instance, African Christians, adherents of Afro-Arab solidarity. Those white-sponsored universalisms have strong appeal for those blacks who are anxious to escape their racial particularity into some alleged universality. And that's the problem I'm seeing in a lot of black folks, so-called educated, so-called religious black folks. It's escapism. It's escapism that they just can't shake. The aim of this theme is to inculcate a clear understanding of the historical impediments to African liberation and development, and further, to provide a clear criteria for identifying and handling those less obvious impediments to the advancement of the race. You know, like I said, that impediment itinerary, the item, that could have been first. Because trust me, that's the first thing you're going to have to smash. That's the first thing you're going to have to smash. Right? And so we should be aware of this. And we should get out in front of it. Right? We should get clearly out in front of it. Let me, before we go to institutional goals, let me take a station ID break right here, and we'll be back on the other side.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is W.E.B with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the ProBlack Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Also, I just want to remind you guys to number one, tune into all of those shows. All the content is good on KWAZ Radio. Tune into all of those shows. Make sure to subscribe to their channels. Click the bell to be notified when they have something new. Right? And go in and drop comments on their shows, and show up in the live streams, and comment and stuff with others who are there as well. I'm usually around in those live streams as well. I also want to remind you guys too that you can support the shows on KWAZ Radio. There's many ways you can do it. Right now, if you look at the screen, you could support me via Cash App, $bitter MEDZ, Bitter Meds, or you can also support other hosts on the show by buying merch. Thanks to the Revolutionary Matron from the Learning Curve podcast, we have a merch store, and you'll see the card showing up right above here in a minute. You'll see the card that that you could click the link, and you can go to that link, and you could purchase a t-shirt. We have a lot of sizes available. We have a lot of colors available. I don't have the spot lined up right now to play for you, the commercial that shows everything, but definitely you guys should go there, purchase a t-shirt. You'll get something in return for your help and your support of a show on KWAZ Radio. All right, so make sure you guys do that today. And we have new designs coming. We have other ideas that we're starting to put together in time for the end of the year, in time for Kwanzaa holiday, etc. So you guys make sure tune into that link. Make sure you're familiar with the merch store. And like I said, support a host today. The proceeds go towards improving the shows, the individual shows, as well as improving the radio network as well. So let's continue with the reading here. We're at the itinerary item of institutional goals. Fundamental assumption: 1. Nationhood is the only means by which modern civilization can completely protect itself. Independence of government is the means of protecting not only the individual, but the group. Nationhood is the highest ideal of all peoples. All of us may not live to see the higher accomplishment of an African empire, so strong and powerful as to compel the respect of mankind. But we in our lifetime can so work and act as to make the dream a possibility within another generation. That's a well-stated fundamental assumption, right? The problem I think we have a lot is I think we fundamentally know as a people, we know it inside of us, that this nationhood that some of us talk about, not because we don't all talk about it, this nationhood that some of us talk about, inside ourselves, we know this is a thing that's hundreds of years away, maybe thousands of years away. And because it's so far away, because it's not something that you can realize in your lifetime, right? I think a lot of people just bow out. It's kind of like the whole global warming thing. I think most people look at that and say, listen, by the time Earth's atmosphere ignites and turns into a fireball, I would have been long dead, my children would be long dead, their children would be long dead, etc., etc. Why am I going to kill up myself on this item today? So they kick that can down the road, right? This is what's happening with black folks. Black folks ain't checking because black folks, this is my belief, black folks are looking at it and say, listen, why are we doing all this work towards this ideal that we will never see? We still have to deal with the realities of today. And so a lot of black folks, I think, prefer to either deal with the realities of today, which oftentimes means that they're not really dealing with it. They're doing things to kind of ignore it, right? That's when you watch your bogus television, bogus movies, read bogus books, party and bullshit and all that kind of stuff, because that's how you're coping with what's going on today. But if you think about it, if you put all that together, you realize none of that makes sense. It makes more sense to live your life in a way that you contribute to something in the future. This is how these other people groups advance, by the way. This is how these other people groups advance. You look at some of these, say, rich folks and other people groups. You go back far enough. You go back to their great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather, or grandmother, something like that. That was the hustler. That was the person who hustled their life off, was in poverty, hustled, put some money into a company and some shares of a company or whatever they did, right? Started a little store and hustled that little store for life, and that's what blew up. Those stocks that they bought back in the day, that's what blew up, right? You got to be the sacrifice. You have to be the sacrifice. You have to have that vision, and that's what we are lacking a lot too. We're lacking vision. We're lacking this other concept that I can't think of the name right now. Pioneer spirit. We got to be pioneer. We have to have a pioneer spirit. That I might get you to the mountain. I might not see you. I might not get up on top of the mountain, but I'm gonna get you to the mountain. My work is gonna mean something. Unfortunately, what we have is a lot of scattered works that pop up here and pop up there at different times. And then those lights, those fires are extinguished through the passage of time, and nothing concrete is really put together, just fragmentation. We have to start having that pioneer spirit and saying and knowing that the work that we do today is going to benefit our people 100 years from now, 200 years from now, right? And we need, and this is why I always talk about the numbers, right? This is why I always flip-flop in my mind sometimes. Sometimes I say, we don't really need numbers. We just got to have a few people. But the reality of it is, that's what we've been doing. We've had a few people doing work. And like I said, to the passage of time, their fire is extinguished, they die, they're gone. And all we have is this fragmentation of work, as opposed to a cohesion and practicing a concept of cohesion, number one, and then two, continuation. Where this person has, quote unquote, disciples that become the next group of people in the next generation, right? Carrying on the same message and working together as well. Again, cohesion. You know, we just don't have that. To continue, number 2, what is proposed here is a moratorium on futile rhetoric and the beginning of real racial unity through an action program never attempted before. A mass organization expressly planned to enrich the lives of the people in all fronts and directly through the people's ownership of and profit sharing in all economic enterprises. A program to form hundreds of organizations into one vast nation body of millions, with each society carrying on its own functions as before, except in matters concerning the whole race, or organized by families and individuals, community by community, and state by state. There's a need for an operational definition of Pan-Africanism and African nationalism that will be broad enough to include all Africans in the world. We have lived through the longest and most tragic Holocaust in human history. Every attempt has been made to dehumanize us and deny our humanity. I am of the belief that faith has preserved African people for a special purpose on the earth. We are the only people who can make universal promises and keep them, because we have no designs on the lands or the resources of other people. Part of our mission should be first and foremost to deliver Africa to African people. And from the vantage point of our Africanness, we can give the world a new definition of freedom and responsibility. If this is our mission, it's also the legacy that we leave for our children and other children still unborn. You know, I just want to add to that. I saw there was some back and forth with a guy on Twitter. What's that fella name? The Good King, I think. Where he was talking about something that I've talked about here before too. I know KW Dawn 7. Shout out to KW Dawn 7. Talked about as well. Is I would like to see a time where Africans can get those Arabs up out of the continent. But realistically speaking, that ain't the aim right now. You got to get sub-Saharan Africa together first, right? Like I've said in the past, you got to start. And again, this is where our elders have said things and talked about stuff. When this is what we got to be working on. A lot of times we haven't even done the work that they laid out. We haven't even put a serious effort into any of it. But one of the things I'm thinking early on, I know it's going to be tough to get done because folks like to have their own things. So it's a psychological thing, right? Folks like to have their own stuff. No one likes to really have to share the town bike. You know what I mean? But some of those lands that are landlocked and almost resourceless in Africa, in West Africa, and East Africa, they need to join, federations, right? Cardinal federations, East, West, North, South, whatever, right? And start to work together, frankly. What's the point of a little landlocked country that can do very little for itself and it's struggling along when you could just be, and I know this is a harsh word, but subsumed or consumed by a neighbor, right? And work towards, not to be second-class citizens or anything, but full citizens of this new creation, right? And work together. And I think Africa needs to start working in groups, And first of the game with Africa has too many countries, in my opinion, right? Because what ends up happening is some civil war happens, and now there's this northern part of this country. And there's the southern part, like North Sudan, South Sudan, and all this old stuff. Let's stop the fragmentation and actually start working to consolidate more. The aim of this theme is to foster a clear understanding of our mission, to build the institutional infrastructure of an independent nationality, and to foster a conscious commitment to advance the African nation and race toward independence and freedom, and the human race toward greater humanity. So this brings us, I guess we finished the items now, the itemized list of themes. This brings us to design. And I hope you guys are paying attention to this stuff and working on your own curriculum or what have you now. And the beauty of it is this too. If you work on your own curriculum, there comes a time, and this is important, there comes a time where you may come across someone who has a curriculum that's arguably better. Don't be no fool. Join in. Find out how to combine these things. Maybe you did one thing better. Maybe you did science better and they did art better or history better, what have you. But join the struggles, right? Join these ideas, join these designs, right? To come out with a even better curriculum than you each had before. You know, so you guys can be, if you, no one really has worked with me, but if you guys want to work with me, you can work with me. If you don't, do your own thing. And at some point, after you've put it into practice and you have some data to show what works, what doesn't, what's the strengths, what the weaknesses, where are there opportunities here, are there threats to this curriculum, and you're looking for inspiration, you reach out to others who are doing it as well and talk to them. And together y'all might crisscross some great ideas and you come up with a new unified curriculum that can be the savior of our endeavors. You know, so keep those things in mind. So you should be listening to this. If you listen to my last paper that I read a Dr. John Henrik Clarke paper. And Clarke outlines a curriculum. He wrote it down. You know, he wrote it down. By the way, if you guys if you guys are willing to, can someone research and pull up the curriculum of Tuskegee Institute under Booker T. Washington? Can someone pull that up for me? That'd be great if you can. Pull that up for me, send it to me. You can email it at bitter.medicine.podcast@gmail.com. You can send that to me. I really need to find that. So by all means, please send that to me. So we're at this part of the reading called design, right? Before we get into this, I would like to ask you guys to keep an eye and an ear out for small YouTubers, black folks, black equals African folks, who are talking about some aspect of Pan-Africanism, talking about African spirituality. They could be talking about sports, as a matter of fact. But from a pro-black type of perspective, or what have you. If you identify some small YouTuber that you like, that you think will benefit from being in a podcast network, and likewise we will benefit from having them on board, so that there's mutual reward. Make sure that they hear this call to action.
Have you ever considered joining KWAZ Radio? Each of our hosts shares their unique perspective with you. You might have a perspective that needs to be shared. If that's true, hit us up at kwaz.radio@gmail.com. What are you gonna do? What you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? Make sure let them know what they can do. Or if it's you, well, now you know what you can do as well. Join KWAZ Radio, pitch us a show idea, email them at kwaz.radio@gmail.com. And the website is coming along too, by the way. So make sure, pitch your ideas. We would like to have different types of shows, more fun shows, a mental health show, a debate show, perhaps a dating game show would be dope as well. You know, that you know. So just let us know. Reach out to us. So we're in this part of the towards an African-centered curriculum called design. The generative theme of African-centered nationalist thought and the theme which lies at the basis of the ACTI is nation building. Nation building entails reaching back into historical origins, rescuing and restoring the culture and history of African people, which is Sankofa. Nation building further encompasses the process of elaborating an ideology, which in turn serves as a cohering force for the constituency that is mobilized by it towards specific goals. Nation building as a generative theme for the philosophical foundation of the African-centered curriculum will necessarily act as the guiding principle for the design of the African-centered curriculum. Given the guiding role of nation building as a theme and the subset of themes in the ACTI, it follows that the design of the African-centered curriculum must meet several criteria. First, the organization of the subject content must be integrated both horizontally and vertically in such a way that it stresses holism and provides adequate detail appropriate for the level of instruction, cognitive levels of the students, that is, and comprehensive enough to maintain the interrelated nature of curricular fields. Second, the curriculum must be purposeful and mission-oriented. That mission being the reconstitution of Africans in America as a unified cultural, political, and economic self-determinant national identity. Third, the curriculum must reflect a humanistic concern with the self-awareness of the learner and the dynamic and reciprocal relationship of teacher, learner, family, and community. The fourth criteria of the African-centered curriculum is that it may be integrated with the real efforts of institutions and individuals that are actively engaged in the nation-building process. And that's what I talk about all the time. The fact that most of the so-called political organizations, African or Black political organizations, don't really deal in education. It's kind of random and varied. They'll do tribunals of this. They'll show a documentary of that. They'll have a speaker talking about these things. But where's the breakout rooms where groups of people break out into different discussions and learning and, you know, things that require note-taking and writing and memorization and analysis and, you know, all of that good stuff. You know, where is that? It's missing. You see? It's absolutely missing. The three aforementioned curricular domains of the ACTI are the cultural, ideological, the spiritual or psychic, affective, and the socio-political and economic. A fourth domain is required in order to facilitate the mastery of scientific and technological practices that the contemporary societies increasingly demand. Fourth domain is labeled simply technology. In order to fulfill the fourth criteria of African-centered curriculum as described above, a fifth curricular domain must be added, that of practical applications for nation building. The whole point for this stuff, the whole point for learning is towards the building and the maintaining of this nation. That's what those of us who went to college did. We learned how to build or maintain these white people's nation. That's what we're doing with our children. You know, we're sending them out to beg these white folks to help them build and maintain their nations. And it's time we start doing it for ourselves. Right? It's high time that we start doing this for ourselves. So this brings us to curricular domains. And I think this is probably the parts of this book that most people are interested in. The 5 curricular domains provide the basis for the organization of the subject content within the curriculum. Each curricular domain consists of one or more curriculum fields. The curriculum fields provide the actual structural basis for the organization and presentation of subject matter within the curriculum. The purpose of listing the several fields under the curricular domains is to establish their relationship with the assumptions and aims of the ACTI. The curriculum fields are listed below under the curricular domains and include the subject areas that would comprise the respective fields. Now, let me ask you guys a question who've been around political organizations, or plainly said, organizations, Black organizations. How often have you seen this curricular domain? How often have you gone to one of these organizations and they handed you something similar? Now tell me if there's not a problem involved in that. There's a problem. Because what ends up happening, you end up coming in. I remember I used to go around these, in the late 90s, I used to go around these political organizations. And I thought I knew some shit, right? And one day, a guy who I was cool with, who was Zuliism knows too, in fact, Zuliism might have been there when this happened. A guy mentions Thomas Sankara. And I'm like, who? I believe Zuliism was there. They were like, you don't know Thomas Sankara? And it was back then I realized, I only know really Western contributions by Africans towards the struggle. Like, I'm really not in tune. I realized that in the late 90s, I'm really not in tune so much with the Africans who were in the African side of the struggle. Like, everyone knows Nkrumah, But that was eye-opening for me. And I had been around organizations. And no one talked about Sankara. And it's because you go there and you're just really repeating a lot of rhetoric. You're rallying around something like the most recent thing I've been around, the big talk was gentrification. Right? But for example, there's a curriculum in the world, right? In someone's mind, at least, there's a curriculum that prepares you to deal with gentrification. But instead, a lot of folks put the cart before the horse and just deal with gentrification. And don't put people through the rigors of understanding how this arises, where it comes from, what's the underlying, what's the fundamental understanding here, that these folks are your enemies, and your enemies have just barged into your neighborhoods and took your shit, or took their shit that you lease or rent or whatever. There's often no curriculum in these organizations, right? So the curriculum fields are cultural or ideological. Underneath it, A and B is culture and ideology, and B is creativity. Number 2 is spiritual or psycho-affective. A is self-knowledge, B is ethics and morality. Number 3 is socio-political and economic. This has a few bullet points. A is political economy. B is cognition and inquiry. C is technology. D is mathematics. E is science. F is computer sciences. Number 4 is technology. Mathematics, science, that's ABC. It's mathematics, science, C, computer science, D, functional skills. And then the last one, 5, is nation building, which is the practical applications. If your curriculum doesn't have a practical application, it's not a curriculum. It's just a reading list or something. On the nation building, you have A, career development apprenticeships, B, research theory and practicum, C, community development projects, and D, organizational experience. So you see what I was saying? The most recent organization I've been around, their big thrust was gentrification, right? And as you see here, right, community development projects can be on, you can discuss gentrification while you're actively working on community development projects, right? This is a part of the 5th section of this curricular initiative, right? Which means that everything else before it builds to this. And so therefore, you just don't come and say, hey, you guys come and rally around this idea of these folks are gentrifying our neighborhoods and driving out poor people and all this stuff, as opposed to coming and taking those same people, those same poor people who are being driven out, and giving them a solid education onto their predicament. So that even if they lose this battle of gentrification, they won't lose the next one. Maybe they'll even wake up and decide that, hey, in America, you really don't get to own much. And that these guys determine what's a black neighborhood and what's not. Harlem was a white community. The Harlem that I read about in books when I was coming up, I wanted to see when I first moved to New York as an adult, that was a white area first. And then black folks, there was a push for black folks to kind of push themselves in there and make it black, at least a certain parts of it were black, right? And now that's gone back white again now. These guys really and truly control that stuff. But if you have a more educated group of people, community, right? There's some things that can actually be done to kind of thwart some of that stuff. To at least to a certain extent. Or through the education, like I said, you might just inspire people to get the fuck out of America. Each curricular domain includes several specific subjects that are integrated to reduce the compartmentalization that is typical of subject-centered curriculums. The experience of the independent schools have demonstrated that when the several related subjects are grouped into a singular curricular field and taught by a single instructor or team, the subject material is made more meaningful to the student. The students also recognize the relationship of the several areas of study, and the demonstration of the social relevancy is facilitated. Additional benefits of this design include the ability of instructors at all levels, primary through secondary, to focus their own attention and additional study on related fields of study. Generally, the instruction at the primary and middle school levels is organized so that a single instructor is responsible for all subject areas. Given the natural inclination of individual instructors to favor the area of their greatest competence, the use of the curricular fields model at the primary and middle school levels has the potential to achieve greater levels of productivity in terms of material covered and experiences provided, as well as increases in the levels of accountability. At the advanced middle school levels and the secondary levels, the combination of several subjects within the curricular fields requires larger blocks of time. The usual time period may vary from 90 to 120 minutes. The requirements of greater depth of study in several subject areas at the secondary level necessitate a combination of greater intensity in the classroom, well-organized teaching teams, and longer school days. Additionally, the limited availability of text written in a way consistent with its design limits the degree of textbook reliance. That's an interesting thought. In college, and some of you guys, type 1, if you had this experience as well, in college, it wasn't uncommon for you to have to go and buy a packet, just a selection or selections of photocopies of textbooks or books You know, a chapter here, a chapter there, this, that, there, and the other. Pamphlet here, pamphlet there, and it was consolidated into, sometimes it was bound, sometimes they were kind of loose, kind of like loose leaves. But you go buy this packet instead of having to buy a textbook. And that's something I've heard talked about a lot, that we don't even produce textbooks. And in some respect, we don't necessarily have to, but it would be a good optic. And this is where some of you guys who are listening can be of service. Some of you guys listening, if you don't want to actually sit down and help build curriculums, well, a curriculum could be a cottage industry where some of you guys can write the textbooks. Some of you guys can group together and write textbooks together, right? In the meantime, though, we can take, you're studying history, we can take parts of Robin Walker's books or Clyde Winters or J. Rogers or what have you, package them together in these packets, right, of photocopied material and put those out there, right? Consequently, the teachers provided the occasion to synthesize not only the usual content of the respective disciplines or subject areas, but he or she necessarily incorporates the interests of the student and the resources available in the school and broader community. The broader fields of study also increase the opportunity for the development of creative and critical thinking and the development of the thinking processes, like comprehension, concept formation, oral discourse, composing, problem solving, decision making, research principle formation, etc. An additional benefit is the ease facilitation of correlation of instruction between the principal instructors or teams from the several curricular fields. The scope and sequence of the learning objectives through the respective levels of preschool, primary, middle, and high school will occasion some narrowing of the fields at the more advanced levels of the respective disciplines. At the advanced levels, those disciplines or subject areas will require greater depth. In such instances, a premium is placed on correlated or parallel planning and delivery. One of the major problems of this design involves the selection and ordering of the content of the several subject areas in a way that does justice to the coherency of each particular discipline. The design is intended to foster within the student a holistic and coherent approach to knowledge and at the same time be manageable by the instructors. In order to meet these criteria and avoid the additional problem of each field become no more than a potpourri of unrelated and shallowly treated subject fragments. A model for organizing the content of the several disciplines is proposed. Below. It combines and extends a concept that was explored by the Council of Independent Black Institutions, CIBI, in the development of its Social Studies Curriculum Guide. The curriculum guide is organized in strands that are derived both of cognitive considerations and ideological considerations. The strands are A, family, B, community, C, nation, and D, race. So this brings us to the ideological themes section. What we're going to do is we're going to stop the reading here because I think we want to be fresh-minded when we discuss these ideological themes, right? I think we want to be fresh. And again, I hope you guys are taking notes along the way of this reading. Oh, I didn't know my whole setup looks off, right? But we want to definitely discuss this kind of fresh, but you see the buildup, and you can see where, if you're trying to build a new African-centered curriculum, this right here will help with your design, right? This right here will help with the first steps of your design. And then when we discuss the ideological themes, that should help build upon it some more, right? So this should be a fun time. This should be a fun time next week when we pick it up again. Before I go, I just want to remind you guys that there are other shows on this network you should be tuned into. Make sure you tune into the recent episode of the Harsh Reality Podcast. The recent episode, I'm talking last night for both of these, the Learning Curve Podcast, where the Revolutionary Matron is talking to Rock Soldier. Tune into the recent episode, which was Sunday, the wrap-up of the open secret to white domination, right? Make sure you guys help out all of the shows, help out the network, purchase a t-shirt today, or, go to your favorite podcasters on this network, podcasters show, find out the Cash App. Mine is $BitterMeds. You can find out the rest from the other folks. Go on and support those shows. The support that you give via likes, make sure to like this video too, via subscriptions, all that stuff, via watch hours, right? How long you watch a video, the fact that you watch it the whole way, the fact that you share it to have others tune in and watch as well. Those things I can tell you for a fact, those things help. Those things help. They go a long way to building up these platforms. All right. And make sure you guys subscribe to KWAZ Radio's YouTube channel. Do that now. Hit the subscribe button. Click the bell to be notified when new items are posted up on KWAZ Radio's YouTube channel. I want to thank you guys for being here with me tonight. When we return next time, we will read from ideological themes. Until then, you guys be good. I'll be back on Thursday. I'm going to be reading a paper on Igbo economics. I'm going to be back for Saturday Night Shoot the Breeze. The Saturday Night Shoot the Breeze has become like a popular, for this small platform, it's become a real popular segment. You guys are missing out if you're not tuning in. Make sure you tune into that as well. But until next time, you guys be good. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.